Hi. I want to show you a traveler's cue, explaining some of the technical thematic elements, some of the functional components, a lot of what and why. I really believe everything on picture needs to be, when you score something, everything needs to be provoked. You can't just write a piece of music for the sake of music ever, unless it's really calling for it. So I want to show you how each element is both thematically intended, functionally intended, which means what it does and when it does, why it does it, different decisions that I've made as far as utilizing certain motifs and using what I call a sonic identifier. So it's the opposite of a motif. Not the opposite, but it's an element of a motif, but it uses simply the sonority or the sound of an instrument to imply some form of thematic continuity. So when you see a certain character, it could be as simple as we always play an electric guitar for this guy every time he's on screen. What it's doing melodically isn't as of interest in a way, so you could just be kind of using it texturally. So it's not necessarily atonal, but it could just be an effect, but it's something I utilize often because it's a very subliminal psychological element of scoring. So on this scene it's season 3, episode 3, it's a big music episode. It's written in 3 distinctly different thematic sections. In each part, because it's woven into the same timeline, I used consistent thematic elements, but I also used very, very distinctly different ones to reinforce the separate timelines. So when we start the scene off, I'm referencing all the way back to season 1, episode 1, which I've used throughout every moment that I could. This is Mac's FBI theme. It's just this tiny moving motif that can repeat infinitely because it's a static ostinato, but it's quite distinctly Mac. So here he's in FBI mode. He's searching. They're tracking him. There's a lot of tension, and it just kind of skulks behind there. Now when he gets into sort of, I brought in some electric guitar and acoustic guitar, which is pretty uncommon for Travelers because he's doing this foresty kind of theme. So that's just a really simple
Trevor,
electric guitar
looks like he's heading
acoustic
back.
part.
I've got him. I'll meet you there.
Copy.
So when I talk about things being provoked, what's happening here is there's a really big draw from the camera push to feed off of and the movement. So I introduced electric guitar here, pacing in kind of 16th notes, so it feels quicker. So if you watch that over again, there's a wash and then a transition and then a shift in feel. So what we're doing is we're going from kind of tense movement to
Copy.
an upshift to feed off the camera push and the nature. The nature is beautiful here. And there's a natural drop as the searching and solving feel dissipates, and we go to kind of like a tense openness. So in this case, I've chosen to pull back on the score because first of all, there's not much happening on screen. You know, it's just Mac, he's searching. The intent with this guitar part is to get more in Mac's head than into anything else. And this is what I would consider this electric guitar more of a sonic identifier. There is for sure a melody, but just that sound. Because what I do here is I'm pushing an ebow into the pickup on the string, so it creates a lot of weird distorted tension. And I've timed it kind of with the gestures and movements in a way. I also did a lot of vocals here. Just some really weird. That's actually, if I'm No, that's a choir sample I made of just layering myself over and over and over, and it's has its own effect when you pitch it up and down. So just some bass retention. So there's a few elements in this scene. I'm just gonna play through it because there's some really cool elements that I'll draw attention to. So slight stings, but not like huge stings. Just drawing attention to things. This became a very distinct theme. Just that dropping bass tension works really well. I mean, you could do a whole cue of just that and keep it tense. A couple more elements here that were cool. I did some weird breathing. Yeah, why not? It just adds that kind of strange, organic, abstract, rhythmic. Weird. So there's just a little break there for the team. They do their thing, and then to kind of reinforce something similar is happening, so I'm using the same kind of internalized in Mac's head electric guitar sound again. Not playing the same things, but just kind of letting us pull back again. It's a little breath, I think, because it lets you build to this next moment. So this is kind of a recapitulation of the Mac theme in a different key.
Boss, stop. I can explain.
So the overall idea with this scene was to kind of be like the denouement of part one. So there's 3 distinct timelines that are occurring in. Well, I viewed this episode 303 as 3 distinct timelines. So we have, the future Mac, like how can I explain this? There's this is like, him trying to figure out when he's kind of got the amnesia. There's the preceding themes with Alexander, and then there's him and his realization of, it was a pretty dark episode, and I'll explain those cues later on. So the things that kind of weave through the whole episode are this electric guitar sound that we come back with. That as sort of a sonic identifier. We also have this, for Alexander, I did want to do something a little bit more Eastern European. So that's a single cello part that's split into octaves, one shifting down and one shifting up. So it has this tense, weird kind of, I've put some different effects on it. Oof, shouldn't let that get through. So it's just a bit of the Alexander theme, not a huge hint at it because we haven't really revealed what it is. The idea is that we're kind of building up, so this kid is seemingly some kind of monster, and that's what we want to build up to, essentially. So that's just some of the elements from, some of the mechanics that go into a cue. Like, scoring isn't just writing a piece of music and putting it onto. You can see all the distinct sections and the shifts in key and pace and tempo and the instrumentation that goes into it to make it unique and different. You need to become sort of the subliminal narration of a show or a film or whatever it is, and you need to be that voice that kind of guides things along and complements, but doesn't overwhelm unless it's supposed to. Like when you're supposed to stand up, you want to stand up, and when you should be sitting down, you just sit down. So elements like this that are absolutely just basic, but they have a sonority and a character to them because of the sound, and they're distinct. Like if we just watch that scene through with just the bass, it's like, okay, it's saying something different by just being that element, but you can see that single element to picture really, really works on its own for creating something that's super tense, but something that simple could kind of draw too much attention to itself by being that simple. So if you just try it with this ridiculously weird breathing effect I have, and then some pad elements, so you have to approach it so everything, like I said, everything is provoked. There's a reason for every shift. There's a reason that you're bringing elements in. There's a reason you're pulling things out, because the absence of something once you've presented it is incredibly powerful when you create the space for it. I think there's a Japanese word called ma that they use that is kind of the intentionally composed silence, and that can just be a massive element of scoring, where the breaths are. I mean, were you to strip it down to just a single element, I would consider that very bold and not necessarily appropriate on this scene, because it's just not. I think what's been provoked by all the other elements around it is this movement. So that's kind of how I would say a cue weaves in and out of a scene. It has moments of respite. It takes breaths. It internalizes. We really want to be in the character's head at this moment, and it's I think it gets good results when everything is intentional and you're using these show themes and these character themes, and you're referencing back to them, and they're subtle, and maybe they just get past you, like what it is, but you notice it unconsciously. I think it's a huge part of kind of what the mechanics of a score, what was required to achieve kind of. I mean, I think a score is successful when you've drawn someone in, when you've brought someone into the picture where they're not conscious of what's happening. They're just so immersed in the story, and there's, the second you get a little bit too kind of, let's say, handsy, whatever the musical equivalent of handsy is. As soon as you get too much of that, you're drawing attention to yourself, not drawing people into the show. And that's bad. That's going to get you fired. Maybe.